I say hi to Ryan Thrower since I know he'll listen to this?
Yeah. Let's start with that. Let's start with that. Ethan Newberry, welcome to the podcast. Please say hello to the people and especially Ryan Thrower.
Dude, I can't tell you how excited I am to do this podcast with you. One, you're one of my favorite people ever. I'm just freaking honored because you have like stellar guests and you have an angle that no one really has in the podcast scene, being a pro and being an elite, being in the space for so long. And I don't know, you bring a super awesome perspective and you have such a cool guest lineup that I'm a little nervous to be here. Actually, I feel like a complete imposter syndrome. I don't belong here.
Well, dude, it's so fun to turn the tables on you a little bit. And thank you for that, very nice compliment. But yeah, I mean, it's an honor to have you on the show, and I'm having a blast doing this. And much of what I do is inspired by, what you do. And I think you mentioned Ryan Thrower, and I feel like this is actually kind of a fun place where we can start because, for those who aren't familiar, Ryan is responsible for editing each and every one of these podcasts, among many other things that he does for us at Pyllars. He is, as I say, the MVP, and we made the connection to Ryan through you. So why don't you give a glimpse into who Ryan Thrower is and how his connection with Pyllars came to be?
Yeah, no doubt. First, let me just say hi to the man because I know he's probably listening to this podcast, going through the production side of it. He's listening. So Ryan, I hope this doesn't get too long. I'm really sorry. The dude is awesome. We have mutual friends up here in Washington that introduced us at some point. And he does video work. He does photography. He does audio stuff. The dude is kind of like the fix it all. Like he's the handyman that can show up and kind of Swiss. Thank you. That is exactly what I was looking at. Swiss Army knife. He could do anything and he does it really, really well. And he's so open to learning. And he's just like the freaking nicest dude ever.
Yeah.
And he also has a real deep knowledge of beer and craft brewery. And I mean,
we're such bad influences on each other. It's hilarious.
I can only imagine the Rainier FKT having you guys in the same room and talking about beer, and he's bringing beers to drink and you're bringing beers to drink. And I'm just sitting there like, just consuming some of the best stuff and listening, fly on the wall style.
Yeah.
The dude is great, man. And his character is really his big selling point. He's just so kind and generous. And
it's so funny because we were actually reminiscing about this just a couple of weeks ago when we were in California doing some work on our sort of projects here. And, it was so funny because I was in Seattle with you for the Ginger Runner Presents event at University of Washington in collaboration with Gary Robbins and Ellie Greenwood. And Ryan was there helping you out. And on our drive back down to Portland the next day, Harmony and I were sort of bemoaning the existing podcast producer that I had sort of enlisted to assist us. And it was on that drive home that I sent you a text and said, "Hey, do you think Ryan might be, a good candidate for somebody to sort of help out with this?" And you made the connection. Man. Yeah. And he had never edited a podcast in his life, but like you said, he's a Swiss Army knife. So shout out to Ryan Thrower. I'm glad we could sort of pat him on the back here on the podcast. But yeah, he is our chief content guy at Pyllars. He takes care of everything and including this podcast. But anyway, let's talk about you, bro.
And what's funny is I just remembered that we actually met before I knew we met at mile 95 of Cascade Crest 100. I was about to wrap it up. I was delirious. And there's photos of me coming through that last aid station, and he was working it at the time. And he's in my Cascade Crest 100 movie at the aid station. And he just flies by in the background. And at one point when he was working with me on a project, he's like, "Dude, did you know I'm in your Cascade Crest video? Like we met years ago." I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Here, pull it up." And he's in the background. I'm like, "Holy shit. Like we met back in 2015. I didn't live here. We didn't know each other." It was awesome. It's pretty cool.
It's so funny because the exact same thing just happened to us a couple of weeks ago, because I didn't realize that I had met him that year that the wildfires canceled the North Face 50. And they
Oh,
did sort of like an ad hoc 50K group run up at Donner Summit where the smoke was a little less terrible. And Ryan was like, "Oh yeah, like yeah, we sort of like met there." And went back and looked in my phone, and I had a picture of Ryan Thrower on my phone from November of 2018, like 2.5 years before he became like family to us. But anyway,
that is so funny. That's
funny place
great.
to start. Anyway,
That's great.
let's talk about you, bro. I want to really like go deep on Ethan Newberry
I'm open to it.
and the Ginger Runner, and kind of start, from the earliest days or as far back as you feel is relevant, and talk a bit about, what, your childhood was like, where Ethan Newberry, the sort of creator and the runner, was born. So sort of give us your life story a little bit, or what put you on the path that you ultimately took.
Oh man. I've been on this earth for so many years, Dylan. I don't know which one to start at. I think just growing up in the Northwest, you have this connection to the woods, the mountains, pretty much nature. It's just a part of your life in the Northwest. Like everyone is doing something on the weekends. And this was back in the 90s when my family moved from Portland up to Washington. I've just always had rain and fog in my blood. And I think when you grow up here, especially in the suburbs, like way out in the woods and stuff, most of your time as a kid is spent playing in the woods, getting lost in the woods, building tree forts in the woods. And so for me, I've always had this connection just to the outdoors. Learned how to ski, was super into skiing growing up, soccer, track, all these sports. I was never good at anything. I just really enjoyed everything. And I want to emphasize that I was never really good at any sports. I feel like that sort of shaped who I am now, and kind of where Ginger Runner came from as far as the roots was that I never won anything. I wasn't the star soccer player that was scoring goals or defending or anything. I just wasn't a sports star, but I love sports. Like I love soccer and I love running, everything about it. So I think just starting at a super young age, I just had this connection. As I grew up and went to college and sort of was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do and also not figuring out what I wanted to do, right out of high school, I started performing at a local comedy club. It was called Jet City Improv. It was all improv comedy, basically comedy. You get up on stage, you make it up on the spot. You get a suggestion from the audience and you do scenes and stuff with your teammates. It's like, Whose Line Is It Anyway? I don't know if you remember that TV show.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that.
I have so much respect and admiration for improv people.
Dude, it is one of the funnest, most amazing things and exhilarating things to do. A lot of people think they can't do it or don't do it because it scares the shit out of them.
Right.
Like getting up on stage and not having a plan. But when you start to work that muscle and play with that muscle, it's freeing, being able to create on the spot is amazing. There's nothing quite like it, especially when you have a visceral audience response, like laughter, which is just, it reinvigorates you, it inspires you, and it just makes you feel good, man. When you have an audience of 300 people on the edge of their seats waiting for the next joke or the next funny thing, and it's an amazing feeling.
So were you always
were
you always sort of like a jokester, like the funny guy in school?
God, no, man. I was kind of geeky. I was the band nerd. I was shy. I would say it was in high school. Man, this is weird. It's kind of weird to think about now as a much older adult. But there was a thing at my high school called Mr. Eastlake, which is, this is back in the 90s. It was like a talent show, but it was for jocks. So it was basically like high school quarterback getting up on stage and doing stupid talents, and the school goes wild, right?
Yeah, and he's the prom.
So I had prom king, man. Like, who's the most popular dude in school? They're going to win Mr. Eastlake.
Okay,
but there'd be like 20 guys, most of which were football players or basketball players, and everyone gets up on stage, and I mean, it's funny. It's super funny. We'd go every year to watch, and then I think it was my junior year. this is high school. I had a teacher that was like, hey, you know, I think you'd be really good as Mr. Eastlake. I was like, what? Nah, fuck that. Like, that's not my thing. I'm not popular. I'm not funny. Like, I think I'm funny, but I'm only funny amongst my close group of friends. And I don't know. This isn't for me. My teacher was like, no, listen, trust me. I think you got something here. I'm going to sign you up and you're going to do it. And we're going to see what happens. Worst thing that happens is you get up on stage, you perform, you have a good time, and you lose.
Yeah.
And you embarrass yourself in front of the entire student body. So I was like, yeah, okay, sign me up. What is the worst thing that can happen? And I started to take it really seriously. There's like a talent competition. You walk on stage with a tuxedo and you're supposed to look all cool. There's like it's like a stand-up section. There's a talent, a sketch. I don't know. There's all these weird parts of it.
Yeah.
But I started taking it super serious. So I wrote a sketch. I started figuring out what my talent was going to be. I did all of these things. So I wrote a song that I played on guitar. It was all about a local town called North Bend. It's just outside of Seattle.
Yeah.
So I wrote all these jokes about North Bend that to my high school, like everyone there would get. Obviously, I don't think that would translate through the podcast, but
Sure.
I remember just making jokes about this specific city. My sketch that I wrote had my dad in it. So he came out on the stage and he was with me in it. And then I got the local weatherman, the most famous weatherman in Seattle. I reached out and was like, hey, I'm running for Mr. Eastlake. I'm a nobody. Do you want to be in my sketch and join me on stage? And he's like, yeah, this sounds great. So It was like, I got the local king weatherman.
Dude,
to
in
do
those
a
days
video.
too is when like the local weatherman on the local TV station
everything.
is like, yeah, they're like celebrities.
What does Jeff Renner say today? I just want to turn on and watch Jeff Renner, man.
Oh yeah, it's still raining.
It's still raining. But he's that. I think he's since retired. He still makes appearances from time to time, but he's the dude that this is literally no joke. All right, let's take a look at the weather today. Lots of rain and the clouds are dark and stormy, but don't worry, that high pressure system won't add too much pressure to your life. That's him. And he was just the king of weather in the Northwest in the 90s.
Yeah.
And he said yes to be in my sketch. So that talent competition, that Mr. Eastlake thing, dude, I fucking killed it. Like the nerd, the geek came out on stage and I felt something come alive inside of me. And it just felt like this is what I was meant to do. I want to perform because the audience was eating it up and everything was working. The sketch with Jeff Renner was amazing. My dad was great. Like everything was awesome. I totally lost. I did not win, but it was one of those moments where I knew what I wanted to do.
Right.
And it was perform. So that teacher who had faith in me saw something that I didn't have or that I didn't see. And it was because of that, I think, that I had confidence to go join this improv theater company in Seattle, go audition and get in. And I performed at that theater for 10 years.
Yeah.
It was the reason I went to University of Washington. So I could stay here and I could perform 4 nights a week while I'm going to classes.
Mm.
And so by the time I graduated college and I got a great job in a creative industry, I was doing motion graphic design and graphic design for a local board game company. So I was doing like really cool stuff during the day, graphic design, designing board games. And then at night I was doing comedy for audiences. And it was just this really cool mix of creative outlet and freedom of expression and comedy.
What an awesome story.
It wasn't, it just wasn't enough.
Yeah. I mean, it's so cool too. I mean, just like thinking about that feeling you get when you sort of get a small taste of what ultimately becomes like your life's obsession, and similar for me, I can point at things like that in my past that were very much like sport related, but where you find like, oh my God, like I actually really enjoy doing this and I'm good at it. Like, and I'm now fully addicted to it. And
do you have a breakout moment? Like, do you have a moment? Like for me, it was that light switch moment. Do you have something like that?
Yeah. I mean, like when I started focusing on playing lacrosse, and sort of stopped playing every other sport, that's sort of when Yeah, I started, improving super rapidly, and the sport was exploding in Colorado at the time where I grew up. Of course, it had traditionally always been sort of like an East Coast prep school sport, and it was all of a
Right.
sudden sort of like a public school Colorado sport, and it had everything that I loved about sport. It had the team camaraderie. It had some physicality. I'd played a little bit of football in the past too, but it also had like the finesse and the speed of basketball and soccer. And so like the mix of those two things, I would just like became totally obsessed with it. And it was all that I thought about. And of course, like when I started having success as a player on the field, then it was like that same situation where it was like, oh, okay, like this is my thing. And then ultimately also having a similar experience with running a little bit later in life. It's amazing. But
Right.
to sort of echo what we said about Ryan, like you're also quite a Swiss Army knife yourself, like you said that you were a band nerd, but obviously like musically talented. You still make basically all the music that goes in your films. Obviously you're a great filmmaker, which most people know you for, but also your graphic design and stuff like that too. Like, have you always had sort of like that creative disposition to you? Were you always sort of like somebody who, I don't know, just like was looking for creative outlets, and how'd you nurture all those different skills?
Without a doubt, I think I've always needed something. I think it was around, when I was in high school and playing an instrument, I realized how much I truly enjoyed music. I grew up with a piano in our house, and I don't think anyone played it. I think my sister might have taken lessons at one point, but I mean, it was an old piano. It was an untuned piano, but I remember always pounding on it and playing it and teaching myself songs, not reading music, but teaching myself my own songs. And I think just growing up with that sort of just kind of lurking in the background that at any point I could sit down to a piano and make something. Or my mom was an interior designer, so she always had pencils and pens just kind of sitting around. And she had a room in the house that she had to go to school while she was raising me. So she always had homework. And so she was always doing work with mechanical pencils and colored pencils and pens and stuff. And so I would always want to do that too. So I think I just had this sort of like freedom to explore what creativity was. It was just creating to create and not around any sort of structured lessons or classes or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think that planted the seed that I always needed to be doing something creative at all times without measure.
Did you have like a formal education in these creative outlets? Obviously you said that you were in the band in high school, but at the University of Washington, was that what you were studying in addition to doing the improv work on the side? Or are you somebody who just sort of like teaches yourself everything, like how to do graphic design and how to make films and music, et cetera?
100% self-taught like
Wow.
that. I think that was, again, when I went to University of Washington, I wanted to go to a film school. I wanted to go study filmmaking. There just weren't many. There weren't any near me, but there weren't many that were affordable. I mean, I applied to Cornell. Like Cornell in New York had a film program. I believe Boston University had a film program. I got into USC, but all these schools were astronomically expensive.
Yeah.
And my family doesn't come from money. So it was sort of like, we got to figure out what you can actually do. And for me, that was an in-state school. And I decided UW because one, I'd stay closer to the theater that I was performing at. So
And
I'd have a creative outlet.
that's like your postgraduate degree in creativity right there, right?
I mean, what I learned there was so much more worth the actual education that I paying for.
Yeah.
Just the stage time. And, I ended up doing, like, I taught myself Photoshop. Yeah. And so I did all the posters for all the shows at the theater. So I was constantly doing design, just self-taught and creating stuff that would get printed and posted on walls around the city. And it was like, wow, I'm doing work that people are seeing that I'm doing, with no formal training. It's pretty cool. At UW, I did find a secret little department. I don't know if it still exists. I don't know if it's still there, if the teacher is still there, but there is a communications building. And in the basement of that communications building was this tiny little computer lab that this absolute perfect quintessential sort of basement computer guy, he hosted. He basically had this program where it was a work study where for an entire quarter, you could get, was it 5 or 10 credits as long as you taught yourself something through computers. So I found this lab and this guy, like his desk full of Mountain Dew cans. I was like, this is where I belong. This is where I need to be. And I was like, hey, I want to learn how to edit video and I want to learn how to do Photoshop. And by the end of the quarter, he let me to do it for 2 quarters. So I was like, by the end of the second quarter, I want to show you something. Mm-hmm. I want to show you a portfolio. And he goes, this is great. You've got the next 6 months to do whatever you want.
Wow.
And it was this was probably, again, my junior year of college. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And when I found that, it was like, this is great because now I can teach myself all the things I want to learn and get credit for it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
So ultimately you moved to LA some years later. And was that to chase the dream of making it in Hollywood, so to speak? And tell us about those years and what it's like to sort of hustle as a struggling, talent in a super competitive environment.
Struggling talent. Dylan, I'm a perfect talent in LA standards. You look at me, you're like, man, that guy needs to be everything.
Well, but isn't it? I mean, I'm just assuming that it's got to be like you moved down there probably without a lot of connections, a lot of friends, and you're trying to make your way in an industry where there's probably thousands of other people who are also talented, who probably have more connections, more experience. I mean, what's the hustle like there?
It's brutal, man. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to try to play up the drama of it. It's brutal. It's really difficult, and you really got to grow thick skin. I think that's ultimately priority number one. Kind of what I found with my work and stuff up here was that it was fulfilling me, but it wasn't enough. And I had always wanted to sort of see what am I capable of in comedy and performance. So moving to LA was one of those decisions that it took me a while to get there. It took me a while to like get that confidence to leave what I had established in Seattle and then go literally start from zero. Like you said, no connections. I had one friend that had been on American Idol and that was it. Like that was my connection to Hollywood, was just having one friend that had been down there before. But I knew that I would always regret not trying. So I'll never regret moving to LA and trying LA, but I would have always regretted had I not. Mm-hmm. So moving down there in 2007, I wanted to have a safety net. I think I was confident enough to make the move, but not confident enough to start without some sort of safety net. And I made contact with a company down there that does trailer cuts. So they cut movie trailers and film trailers and video game trailers. And I was like, hey, I'm a graphic designer, motion graphics guy in Seattle. I work for this company. Here's my reel. Can I come in and contract work for you? And I found one that said yes. And they brought me in as a basically entry-level motion graphics designer. And they worked me senseless, dude. I was expecting to have like a 9-to-5 job. And then in the other times I could like try to get an agent and try to pursue acting. But it was near 24 hours a day. You had to be on call to do graphics for movie trailers. It is a brutal industry. And I knew when I got to LA and after about 6 months of that that wasn't the path. Like that's not why I moved to LA. It gave me security, but it didn't give me any freedom to do anything. I was locked in a black box editing titles and graphics for movie trailers all day.
So did you feel the pull, like I want to be on the other side of the camera sort of thing? Like I want to make use of my skills as a comedian or as an actor?
Yeah.
So what did
I was really
transition?
thankful to have it was a tough one. I was thankful to have the backup skills of motion graphics. So I kind of told myself, worst case scenario, get some contract work, you can survive. But I started taking less classes at some of the local improv theaters, Improv Olympics, Second City, Upright Citizens Brigade. These are some of the bigger improv theaters in the world. There are occasions where individuals from those theaters go on to SNL. And that's sort of where I wanted my path to eventually lead to Saturday Night Live.
Dude,
every kid from the 90s
awesome.
grows up thinking
you
that.
would be awesome on Saturday Night Live. Don't give
I
up.
auditioned. And that sounds like my mom. My mom's like, you should be on Saturday Night Live. Mom.
Yeah.
Do you want me to make a call? I auditioned and I didn't get very far because I don't know. I don't do really good impersonations. I can imagine it's a crazy audition process that you really have to get far into before you can even be considered. But yeah, over the years, the first 3 or 4 years in LA, I went from graphic designer, motion graphics guy to just trying to find an agent to going on commercial auditions and auditions all over the city, just hoping for a yes, like just hoping for one casting director seeing me and going, yeah, this guy's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, again, I was doing improv in the theaters in the evenings, performing and meeting and hustling. And you're basically rubbing elbows with everyone you can and saying yes to everything. And yeah, you want me to do a free show for you at 11 p.m. in downtown Hollywood? I'm there. I won't miss it. And you're just doing as much as you can. And I booked my first audition. And it was one of those moments where my brain just went, yeah, dude, this is it. This is your big break. It was a tiny commercial for TBS. Do you remember the TBS Funny commercials? Like 1-800-TBS Funny? They were just
I know what TBS is. I remember TBS.
The correct answer is no, I don't remember that one. TBS, the network, had these ads in the late aughts that were like a phone operator answering going, hey, welcome to TBS 1-800-TBS Funny. How can I direct your call? And it's usually like a celebrity saying, or they're using movie clips of a celebrity saying something. And the person on the other end is like, yeah, that's funny. That's a good clip. And that's it. So I got the job as one of those people. And man, it was not my big break, but it certainly was my first yes. And that was all I needed.
Yeah.
I remember being on set and thinking like, I'm an actor now. I'm getting paid. I'm on set. Look at the lights, look at the cameras, and having a fucking panic attack.
Yeah.
Just sitting there and sweating in my shirt and freaking the fuck out and feeling like I was going to throw up because there's a difference between being like here, you and me talking on camera and having a Zoom call or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's and being in front of a client who's $1 billion client with 16 cameras aimed at you and all these big fucking lights, dude. I was terrified.
It's so interesting. I mean, because I also sort of like wanted to talk about like this, you've talked about having anxiety as it pertains to, both your life as a talent, an on-screen talent, but also in your running with your Amongst the Evergreens film about your Cascade Crest race a few years ago. And to me, like, it seems like improv would be like the worst possible passion or I don't know, life direction for somebody with anxiety. And it's interesting to hear you sort of talk about the difference between when you're putting a movie up on YouTube or whatever that's going to get 100,000 views or whatever, or just like being in a studio with 15 people and a paying client, and that's the thing that freaks you out.
It's funny because I've sort of discovered this over the last few years. It was around Amongst the Evergreens that I sort of figured this out, that I tend to choose things in my life that make me really uncomfortable because they make me uncomfortable. Like improv, for someone who suffers from anxiety and has since I was a kid, improv is seemingly the last thing I'd ever want to do. But what it did was it put me in front. It made me stand up in a very uncomfortable situation and make up stuff on the spot in front of people. I mean, it's public speaking to the nth degree. I mean, it's insane. But doing it and engaging in it, it's like behavioral therapy where you're kind of constantly putting yourself in that situation, and you begin to learn like, hey, it's not so bad. What's the worst thing that can happen? And so that's sort of what happened with improv, was that it went from this terrifies me and it's a trigger to I have ownership of this and I really like it. And that's sort of what running did to me too, especially distance running, because I also I hate throwing up. I hate all of these, I hate my body fighting against me or bonking, the feelings that you get with the numb fingers or the tingling sensation where you feel lightheaded and you feel like you're going to pass out. Like all those feelings I hate. I can't stand it. Like legit have a phobia of throwing up. And in my mind, I'm going, well, what's the thing that's going to, not consciously, by the way, I'm not consciously choosing to do this, but
sure,
subconsciously, I think my brain was saying, what's the closest you can get to doing that and not do it and have control over it? And it's funny that ultra running just tended to be the thing that was it, because you're trying to control your body so much in ultra running, but there's so many unknowns that are just constant tests. You're constantly being tested. So whether it's nutrition, calories, hydration, salt, heat, distance, weight, gear, there's so many different things that you're testing and are testing you, that when you find yourself in an uncomfortable situation, you have to solve it. Like you have to find your way out of it. And so for me, someone who's really afraid of getting sick and sort of being out of control, that's sort of the fundamental fear is lack of control. Taking on big endurance events and pushing myself in places and in feelings that are uncomfortable is sort of a facing that fear, so to speak, and sort of gaining some semblance of control over those feelings. And of course, anxiety being the demon beast that she is, it's always shifting for me specifically. So what might have given me a trigger in the past is adapted or changed. And it's always evolving, but
well, that's interesting.
I always found myself really pushing in and leaning into those difficult, uncomfortable things. It's a good find,
Yeah. Well, good for you. And thanks for sharing. I want to talk more about, your big break, with this TBS commercial. No,
sitting
but
in front of these lights, man.
I think as we're talking, it's sort of dawning on me that, you had all the skills to be behind the camera and doing the, the design and post-production work. Your sort of passion was to be kind of in front of the camera, in front of the audience, getting the laughs, having that charisma and energy. And you sort of came into the perfect era in media and entertainment, right? Because when you were in LA, it was sort of like the transition from traditional cable TV, broadcast TV into the internet generation, where, now with Ginger Runner, you're both the guy who's behind the camera and often the guy who's in front of the camera too. So it's sort of like the perfect mesh for the skills that you have and for the kind of passions that you have as well. Do you, looking back at your time in LA and the birth of Ginger Runner, does that sort of resonate with you? And in
without a doubt.
Yeah. So when did you recognize that YouTube was going to sort of be a thing and that you could sort of utilize your own skills independently and create content that at least you enjoyed at first, but ultimately turned into an amazing career?
I started on YouTube in 2006. So I was doing comedy videos in 2006. That's when YouTube started. That was while I lived in Seattle, and I was doing comedy videos for some improv shows that I was doing. We would do improv, and then we'd show a video in the background, and it'd be incorporated into the show. And I remember my mom being like, "I want to see these videos." I was like, "Okay." So I'd upload them to YouTube and I'd send them to her, because YouTube was essentially a sharing service where it's how you shared a video. It wasn't like, "Hey, look at my channel." It was, "Okay, Mom, I'm going to send you a video," but you had to do it through YouTube.
Yeah. It's just like an online cloud storage type place where you can fire a link over to somebody.
That was it. It was like Dropbox or WeTransfer or something.
Right.
But then when I moved to LA and was starting to, when I kind of started to act, and I really wanted to do something, I was like, you know what? I have all this free time. Well, I'm not auditioning. And of course I want to make a name for myself. I'm going to just keep doing sketch comedy videos and post them to my YouTube channel, because that was sort of a way to share what you made. And I was, performing at these improv clubs, and people would be like, hey, I just made this video, posted it to YouTube. Here, check out the link. And so it kind of became a thing where people were sharing links of their videos. And sort of one thing led to another. And I did this contest. I kind of forget all the details. They're really a bit foggy, but I did this. I was doing a lot of live streaming because that was also brand new. There were other websites that were doing live streaming. I was doing kind of late night talk show type things with different people who had this cool studio that was doing live streams. But there was this contest that I believe was sponsored by Samsung, where they would take you to the Vancouver Olympics. You had to basically say, like, I make videos, or I'm a comedian, or I'm a host, and I want to go to the Olympics, and I want to make a video while I'm there talking about all the cool sports. And it was sponsored by Samsung. The prize was like 30 grand and a bunch of Samsung gear. And they wanted to find people who were tech savvy, good on camera, and could create quick content. So me and my comedy partner down in Los Angeles had been performing a ton together, and we both were like, let's enter this contest. Like, what's the worst that could happen? We don't get it, And we ended up getting chosen amongst, like, I think 8 different teams. I'm not totally sure, but there's like 8 different teams of 2. And we went to Vancouver. We went to the Olympics. This is kind of one of the weird transformative moments too, because other members that were there, other teams that won, some of them have gone on to be some of the biggest YouTubers on earth.
Really?
And at that time, they were just starting out on YouTube. There was one guy, his name was Daystorm Power. He had turned YouTube into a career. And I didn't even think, no one knew this was a thing. So the job that I have now, what we're doing right here, also, like, this didn't exist 10 years ago. There was no YouTuber. There was no influencer. There was no online presence that is a career.
Yeah.
But Daystorm Power had done that. So he's a musician. He does a lot of, he'd do funny comedy videos, but based around music, and he'd write new raps every week. And it was really just incredibly talented dude. But he won a spot in this contest. So he went up there in Vancouver, and he was telling us, other creators, like, I make a living on YouTube. This is what I do. Like, I make X amount of dollars per month, and I make a video every week or every Tuesday or whatever. And we were all kind of sitting there going, wait, what?
Yeah.
This is a thing? Like, we don't have to go on auditions and try to make it big or do it. We can actually make our own stuff. And that opened my eyes, man. And that's when I realized that YouTube, that's the next thing.
Wow. What an insight to have. What an insight to have.
It was amazing.
So at what point did it turn from, having a YouTube channel that probably focused mostly on comedy and being creative and funny, to the birth of the Ginger Runner? Like, how did that
2011.
come about? Yeah.
I started realizing, so I was doing years of comedy videos week after week. And I started realizing that I was becoming a glorified party clown, because I would create a comedy video that I think was funny, and I'd be like, oh, this isn't funny. And then I'd have to I'd feel the need to change it to appeal to the audience that I had generated at the time, which was a lot of like young kids, a lot of young people really wanting raunchy comedy and just edgy stuff. And I was like, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't me. This is shit, man. I'm literally just dancing around like a party clown, trying to entertain a really young audience that I'm just like not having fun. So around 2011 was when I had sort of become passionate about gear and shoes and running. I ran the Seattle Marathon in 2009, I think, which was my second marathon at that point. And I just really fell in love with running again. Just was a passion, just something to kind of stay in shape while I was in LA. But I was like, you know what? I am so into gear, and I'm so into the nerdy side stuff from the sport, but I'm not seeing anything online about it. Like, I'm not finding shoe reviews that aren't being filmed from like someone who owns a store. It's like, hey, we just got these new Sauconys in. Let me tell you about the Sauconys. So I kind of found this gap where there wasn't reviews, there wasn't entertaining content. And I was like, you know what? I want to do this. Like, I want to talk about gear. I love it so much. isn't that what YouTube is about? Like YouTube should be about finding your own voice and talking about the things you want to talk about, doing the things you want to do. And so it was in 2011 that I sort of had the plan. I was like, I'm just going to put my shit out there. I'm going to put some Ginger Runner stuff out there, have fun with it. The goal is to always be entertaining, educational, informative, but have fun. It should never be stressful, and it should never be more than just running and the enjoyment of it.
And so
that's the kind of the birth.
As you sort of transitioned into this new model, focusing on running and everything that you do now, did you start to see your audience respond? I mean, obviously, I'm sure it took time to sort of carve your niche and recognize, what people wanted to see and what sort of fulfilled you creatively. Mm-hmm. But did you start when you made that pivot? Did it feel right, and did you get that validation from the audience? Did it start to grow sort of from there?
It was essentially starting from zero again, because I had spent so much time with the comedy channel and had kind of abandoned that. And I was booking acting jobs too at that time. I spent a couple years just not doing well in Los Angeles. And that was sort of what maybe gave me the gas to figure out, listen, one, you're not doing well financially, and two, you're not doing well creatively. You're not enjoying what you're creating. So maybe this is the opportunity to really figure out what you want. And I ended up booking a couple good acting jobs and going on some auditions that sort of gave me this weird, wait, why am I doing this? Why am I going on these auditions and going into these waiting rooms where I'm looking at 20 other redheaded dudes, half of which are named Ethan? And what's the point?
Yeah.
And it was at that same time that the Ginger Runner thing was sort of like, I'm willing to start from scratch and start over if it gives me joy and happiness. I enjoy making content. I love talking about gear. I love running. Let's see if I can try to build something here. So the audience, it took a long time.
Yeah.
The first few years were really slow.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, but it's turned into a juggernaut. And, I think everybody can identify with, having the couple really shitty years, and now looking back at that, having that be the birthplace of the Ginger Runner empire. I mean, it's pretty freaking cool, man. I'm sure, those were some unpleasant times. But man, it created a monster, and, you gotta be grateful for those moments too. So at what point did it become clear that Ginger Runner was going to be a thing? Or at what point were you sort of like, okay, this is working and maybe I could actually commit to this full time?
It was before 2015, because 2015 is when we, both Kim and I, really made the decision, we're all in on Ginger Runner. This is it. This is what we want to do for the rest of our lives in some capacity. And I would say the 2 years leading up to that were sort of the farewell to acting and improv. That was the other sort of heartbreaking farewell, as I was becoming disenchanted with performing. And so LA, having to grow that thick skin and really learn what you like and don't like. I feel like LA taught me a lot, and it did ruin a lot of the things I loved. But what it did show me was that something like Ginger Runner, which I own and is created by me, sort of gave me everything I needed, which was a passionate outlet for things I like to talk about, a creative outlet for visuals that I like to create, whether that's through film or graphic design or art or gear, and a passionate outlet for music. So I could create all the music for my films. It basically gave me an endless array of paths that I could choose to trod down.
Yeah.
So in 2015, that was the full, let's do this. Let's turn off everything else. Let's focus on Ginger Runner. It's when we opened up our Patreon, which at the time was early in the Patreon days, as far as that, they were a new company. They're kind of figuring out what they were doing with the creators. And we were full on rolling the dice. Because it's not easy to say, hey, I do this thing. Do you want to come support me doing this thing?
Yeah.
There's this site called
Especially
Patreon,
in those early days too. It's like, what is this? GoFundMe for actors and comedians. Like,
totally, man. Yeah. Like you can't say, go to my Kickstarter or go to my GoFundMe. Like it's hard.
Yeah. It's amazing.
It feels
how
a little
that's
dirty
been
to say
embraced,
that.
though. I mean, it's such a great model. And yeah, I mean, it's really opened the door for, better content, independent content,
Yep.
stuff that's not necessarily dependent on, you trying to sell me a mattress or whatever. And yeah, I can see how for you, yeah, with all your different skills, it's like the perfect outlet. It's so funny that you had that introduction to YouTube like back in 2006, and then it wasn't until 2015 that it was actually like, this is my full-time thing. That's freaking 10 years of hustle, man.
Dude, it's a long hustle. And I mean, I think anyone who starts, I don't want to ever dissuade anyone from pursuing a YouTube dream, or I mean, it doesn't have to be YouTube. I hate, saying like, oh, I'm a YouTuber.
Yeah.
You want to be a creator. You want to be a filmmaker. You're telling stories. You're sharing information. There's so many other names for it that I think
capture it,
capture it better. Yeah. So anyone who's young and maybe thinking like, oh, I want to do that, but I don't want to hustle for 10 years. Like it's changed. You don't have to hustle for 10 years. This was before there was a business model attached to it. And, I think I had to chisel my teeth the hard way and learn from people who'd done it before me. And I got lucky in a lot of spots and I got unlucky in a lot of spots.
Yeah.
To this day, I don't make anything on YouTube. Like as far as what YouTube pays, it is not, we can't pay rent.
Really? Wow.
100%. It is only Patreon. Like that's it.
Well, shout out to the Patreon supporters out there.
Huge shout out.
So let's, I want to just touch on something you just mentioned. And that is like when you made the decision to walk away from the dream of like making it in Hollywood or whatever, was that around the same time that you guys moved back up to Seattle? And I mean, how did that go for you emotionally, psychologically? I mean, it must've been a bit of a struggle, and it probably was something you arrived at after a couple of years. It sounds like. Talk about that decision that you made, and what it felt like to actually, kind of move away from what had been sort of your ultimate goal and dream.
Yeah, it was hard, man. It was hard, and then it wasn't. I spent about 10 years in Los Angeles. So I was there for about a decade. The first 2 were just, who the fuck am I, and what am I doing here? You're just struggling to find a community. Those first couple of years in any new city, let alone Los Angeles, you're just trying to make it. The 2 years after that were much more like I found my people. Like I found my comedian friends, and I found stages to perform on, and I found niches that fulfilled some of those creative gaps. The next few years were I'm broke. And what was my decision? Why did I do this? What's this lesson I'm trying to teach myself? Having to, go down to Subway and buy a $5 footlong that's going to last me for 2 days. I hope. And it's not like, I struggle, but I don't want to claim that I'm right, that I really struggled. It's like, it was hard, but it wasn't, I think it taught me what I really truly valued.
Yeah.
So it was the last few years in LA when, Kim and I had been dating for a long time, since 2007, like right before I moved down to LA. Our relationship really began to grow the longer I was in LA. So by the time like 2015, when Ginger Runner was sort of like our choice in decisions to move forward, Kim was living down there, and we were much closer. And it was sort of like, I have everything I need. I've got the person that I love. I've got a partner. I've got a creative outlet that, again, just kind of allows me to do whatever I want and fulfill me. What am I still holding on to LA for? What am I still looking for here? That dream for Saturday Night Live, like I had my shot and I didn't get it.
It's still coming, dude. It's still coming.
At this point, I'm like, maybe someday I'll host it. I'm not going to be on it. Yes. Maybe I'll host it.
Oh, even better.
And, there's some first time hosts that are, in their 60s. So I still got time.
Yeah.
But there was just this moment where I started to disconnect with the dream that I moved down there with, because it wasn't me saying I failed. It was me going, holy shit, I succeeded in finding what I really wanted.
Yeah.
Which was just a creative outlet.
Yeah.
That I was in control of. I didn't have a director or a brand or a client on set staring at me underneath $15,000 lights, telling me how to perform. I had my own product. I have a light above me that cost me a couple $100.
Yeah.
And I was making do with so little, doing so much in story and entertainment. And I just felt so fulfilled. And I still do.
Yeah.
So it was just this journey where it took me 10 years to get there. But in 2017, Kim and I were like, we're moving. We're going back to where we love, which is the land of mist and trees and mountains. And man, we haven't looked back.
Rain and fog in your blood, man.
Rain and fog in my blood, bro.
Well, it's great, man. Yeah. And I mean, the things never play out the way we envision them, but oftentimes, they work out even better. And then in a way that, gives you the ultimate fulfillment, that utilizes 100% of your skills. It gives you 100% ownership over your career. You're not dependent on having connections at studios or different, auditioning opportunities. So it's really cool, man. And I want to sort of like shift and talk a bit about like the community that you have sort of built around Ginger Runner, because it's such a cool thing. It's such a powerful thing. And I think, as we sort of just look at the current sort of, media environment, and everybody talks about this creator economy and like, developing like a community of people that really love your content. Obviously, I'm sure feels really good to you. And whenever I come on Ginger Runner Live, we always talk about Greg, my old UPS driver in Mill Valley.
Shout out to Greg.
Shout out to Greg. And just for the audience, Greg he's a UPS driver in Mill Valley. I wish I knew his last name, but obviously my wife Harmony and I lived in Mill Valley for a number of years, and he used to like see me running around town or whatever, and when he would drop things off at our house, one time he said, "Oh, do you know who the Ginger Runner is?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, Ethan's my boy. And so now whenever I go on your show, I give a shout out to Greg, the UPS driver, and it's just like so cool. And also, I've been in so many different countries, traveling to race in Europe and Japan and New Zealand and stuff. Everybody's like, "Oh, Dylan, yeah, I saw you on the Ginger Runner." I'm like, this is amazing. It's like this worldwide network of people that you've built around, this passion that you have. And it's just like, there's nothing cooler than that. And you have 100% ownership over that. And, these people feel a loyalty to you because like they can tell that it's like, it's your passion and that you're good at it, and it's entertaining at the same time, and you provide good information. So I want to talk a bit about like, I don't know, like what it takes to sort of like develop a community around your content, and like maybe for other people who are interested in kind of getting into creative fields. Are there anything that comes to mind in terms of like engaging the people who consume your content and developing a relationship with them?
I mean, it happened organically, because I would say even in the last year, I have felt more connected to our community than I have in the last 10. We just celebrated 10 years of Ginger Runner in February. And I've always had this sense that we have this amazing group of people who watch the videos, and you'll see the same names pop into the comments and say, or kind of follow the journey or share their stories of inspiration. Like, hey, this video led me to this, and I went and did this. And you receive emails from time to time. Like I remember I get tons of emails that are just incredible stories. People who maybe caught the glimpse of a review, and then that review led them to Amongst the Evergreens or Altering Expectations or some other movie that I made. They watch that and then they go, "Oh shit, I could do that." And then they go and do it. And then they report back with, "I ran my first 50K thanks to this one Solomon shoe review, led me to this other whole world of running."
Wow.
And it continues to this day to be one of the most fulfilling things I just never experienced before in my life. Like when you start reading personal stories of triumph from other people, you realize that that's important. It's not just this is sort of the evolution of what I've learned with the channel. And what really matters most to me is I started telling my own stories. I started with like, here's me experiencing adventure or experiencing an ultra, or the pain associated with an ultra, or pushing through mental demons. Here's me experiencing that. And then there was this shift where it started to be about other people and them going through their experiences, documenting you going through your experiences on Rainier or the Lost Coast. And people start to connect to that. And so the stories that I would get back from people were exactly what I realize is what matters to me now. It's other people's stories, because that's what's inspiring me to just continue to get up out of bed and to take another step forward. It's the stories from people. And I know it sounds cliche, but I can't tell you what it's like until you receive an email from someone who overcame cancer and ran their first marathon, and then is training for an ultra, or has a dream to do a 50 miler or something. Like it changes something.
Yeah. What an amazing gift. And it reminds me,
I'm so lucky, man. So lucky.
Yeah. And it reminds me of when we were at Rainier together this past summer. There was a couple people who came up to you and said like, hey, your film about Gary Robbins running this trail got me into trail running. And, we're all there like around you and know you. And you're like, this normal dude, but it's like people come up to you and they're like, oh man, like your stuff has actually like moved me and like changed some part of my life in some somewhat profound way, even though it might seem kind of silly. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing. And I think dude,
if you had asked me in 2007, when I moved to Los Angeles to do like shitty comedy, like, let's be honest here, this is a journey I never thought I would take. And here I am, 14 years after I first moved to Los Angeles, in a place where I'm talking to you, Dylan Bowman, one of the fucking best athletes in the world, about, we haven't even touched on the sport really. We're just talking about life and stuff. And it's just mind blowing that I'm here now in this place in life, and just hearing people's stories and stuff. It just doesn't make sense to how I got here, but I'm so happy I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm so happy I'm here.
Yeah. And I mean, going hand in hand with the community thing too. I mean, you're now a race director, and this community has allowed you to like, 2000.
I was a race director one day. We've had a couple of years of pandemic between that day, but
taking a couple year hiatus.
Ramping up again.
Yeah. But I mean, it's, I think, illustrative of the power of this community that you've built. Is like, okay, you're a creative person. Yeah. You're great at filmmaking. You can do graphic design. You can do, the music that appears in your films. But it's also like, oh, well, actually, Tiger Mountain is here in my neighborhood. And, having that creative brain that you have, you're like, well, let's set up like a super unique format for the race. And it has like its own sort of unique ginger runner quality to it, that other races don't have. And so I think it just like sort of nails home this idea of building community around what really you care about and what moves you. Any other sort of comments about sort of the creator economy that we live in now? Any, sort of like commentary on the present and future of, independent creators, or even like these non-fungible tokens? Are you going to sell any NFTs on
Nifties, bro? Nifties. I was wondering if we get into Nifties. Because I know that you're a little caught up on crypto. So I was like, oh man, I wonder if Dylan and I could talk about that shit.
Damn straight.
I would say the one thing that I've really began, again, I kind of learned this in the last year with the pandemic and having to sort of pivot again and kind of reshift focus on how can we continue to engage the humans and bring humans together. Because one thing we learned with Tiger Claw that year in 2019 was that community begets community. Like you start having people around you that are amazing humans, and people are going to be drawn to the community as much as, people might think like, oh, Ginger Runner, you have this amazing community around you or Kim. The truth is the community has its own community. Like it is the group of people within it that continue to flourish and to grow. We have a Discord server amongst our GR crew members that it is so inviting and wonderful and full of stories of people triumphing. Is that a word? Triumphing?
Triumphant
Succeeding.
Stories. Yeah, sure.
Triumphant stories.
We know
of
what you're
success.
saying.
I appreciate it. But it's so cool because it's hands off. Like, we're not sitting in there trying to stir up stories from people. It's just the community members supporting other community members. We had an individual run his first 100-miler in October, DIY. So he's like, I really want to run 100 miles. There's no races happening. I'm going to run one in my backyard. We had another crew member who lived nearby that's like, I want to be there and I want to support you. However you need the support. She'd never run an ultra before, but she was like a fan of some Ginger Runner videos, and she's a marathon runner, and she showed up and she ran 50 miles. So she, in support of this other GR crew member, ran her first ultra, which also happened to be 50 fucking miles.
Yeah.
In support of him finishing his first 100-miler. It was this kind of like moment where I realized everything had leveled up.
Yeah.
So it's not just, I'm going to make a video, I'm going to put it on YouTube, and I'm going to read the comments and interact with the comments, and that's community.
Mm-hmm.
It was, oh my God, the community now has taken it upon themselves to blossom and encourage and support. There's a fucking GR crew trivia night every week. There's a GR crew book club. There's all these things that are out of our hands. The crew has taken it upon themselves to create, and it is amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
And I'm sure a lot of cool friendships and
without a doubt.
Yeah. That's so cool, man. Well, good for you. So let's talk a little bit about your partner in crime, Kim Tashima Newberry.
Best human on earth, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's also probably pretty amazing, fulfilling for you to be able to kind of share this life's work with your life partner. So, and Kim obviously is talented herself, both on camera and with what you guys do, and as an athlete. And I imagine that, I mean, just any comments about like what it's like to work together and as colleagues, in addition to sharing a life as a married couple. I mean, one of the things that makes me want to ask this is because Harmony and I have a similar thing, with Pyllars and what we're doing now. I mean, she's an integral, super important part of what we're doing, and amazingly talented in ways that I'm totally not. And I'm just wondering if you want to comment about how you guys complement each other.
I hadn't even realized like the parallels. You're right, because we both have our own businesses and our partners are as big, if not bigger, part of it. Right.
Totally.
And I don't think there's zero doubt that Ginger Runner wouldn't be what it is as a brand right now if it wasn't for Kim, because she brings so much additional life experience and perspective and support, like just having endless support. So if I propose an idea of like, hey, what if we made a movie about this? Or what if we did this? Or what if we thought about doing an event like Tiger Claw? She is right there to help, set that volleyball so we can spike it, or she's there to take the reins and absolutely crush it. Like Kim is an absolute godsend. And as far as a wife, I punched so far above my weight. I'm so lucky. She's just, bro. Dude, we're lucky dudes, man.
Outkicked our coverage for sure. Yeah.
Outkicked our coverage. I can't stop gushing about her. And I'm so damn lucky. You got to have her on the podcast, man. Cause she has a lot of just life experiences and stuff. And she's amazing.
We could talk more about her, becoming a U.S. citizen debacle.
Just the amount that she sacrificed to be here too. It's a crazy story, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work, and she's everything, man.
Well,
she's great.
We'll have to pencil her in the near future. So before we, I want to talk a little bit about the Wonderland, obviously, because that's timely and relevant based on the films that you've just released. But first, I figured we talk about a project that you had come up with that we were contemplating doing a couple of years ago. Maybe tell the people about this project.
I'm so sad about this, man.
Tell the people about the project.
This project
it ultimately didn't happen.
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt. I'm just so sad about it. It's one of those things I think I'm still just like, just frustrated. So this idea, it wasn't new. So it had definitely like God, at this point, I don't even remember how I found out about it. I'm trying to think where I read about it or whatever. There's this guy. His name is Forrest Fenn, and he's this art collector, art thief almost in some capacities, because I think a lot of the artifacts he had, there's rumors that many of them don't even belong to him, or he sort of appropriated them from indigenous people. But he has this treasure trove of literal treasure, and decided that he was going to hide $1 million worth of it out in the Rockies, somewhere between the Canadian border and the Mexico border. He's just going to put it out there and hide it, and then write a poem about it. And the poem had clues on where to find the treasure. There is website after website after Reddit thread after Reddit thread about all of this. And this has been going on for years now. So I think this is the 10th anniversary, or it was like late 2020 or something was the 10th anniversary. So this 2010, I think, is when he buried it. And so this has been sort of lore for years. I found it. When did we start talking about? Like 2016, 2017?
Yeah. So
it's been a year. It's been years.
Yeah, a couple of years at least.
I came across this by accident, and it was sort of one of those disbelief moments of, this isn't real. There's some dude that like has pirate treasure that he's hidden in the mountains and just wants you to go find. This is fucking Goonies.
And there's
in
like
real life.
There's a whole like internet subculture devoted to cracking the code and finding it.
And so my brain immediately goes to, well, I'm going to solve this code. I found this hint. I'm going to read his poem. I'm going to know exactly where it is. I'm going to go find fucking $1 million worth of treasure. But wait, what if I made it an ultra running adventure? Because I mean, who knows where this stuff is hidden? It could be deep in the Rockies. It could be in Wyoming near Yellowstone. Who knows? So then I was like, I think this could be a really cool project where we bring together some of the best athletes, ultra runners, and we go try to find the treasure. We bring in like our favorite 5 or 6 ultra runners, let them solve the puzzle, and we go to where they think it is, and we document it, and guarantee we all fail, but we tell the story of camaraderie, brothership, and sisterhood, and we, everyone coming together for a common good. We tell this cool story, right?
Yeah.
I don't need a happy ending in my movies. I think most of my movies tend to have surprise endings.
Yeah.
So I pitched this idea to you, and I think I feel like your first email back was, "Holy shit, how do we do this? Let's fucking go." LFG. And yeah, we started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and I did up a big pitch packet for Red Bull, and it was like, man, it was just fucking sick. I was so excited, and the ball was moving, and Red Bull was on board. It was like, oh my God, this is going to happen. Who are we going to bring in? Like, how is this going to work? And the ideas just kept compiling, and it just kept getting better and better. And I was like, dude, this is it, man. Like, Where Dreams Go to Die was our stepping stone. This is it. This is Oscar, bro.
Yeah.
This is the treasure hunt, man. And then someone fucking found the treasure.
Some jerk went and found our goddamn treasure. Come on, man. Brutal.
Oh, it's such a bummer, man. Such a brutal ending.
It's hilarious. And I mean, for the listeners who are not familiar with the Forrest Fenn story, I wasn't either. But if you just do a quick Google search, you'll end up down an amazing rabbit hole, including, like what happened to the guy who found the treasure. He's like insisting on, I think, remaining anonymous, and like he was
probably doing his best.
Yeah. And like there was a whole community of people who were convinced it was fraudulent, that he didn't actually find it, but that he had to post pictures with Forrest. Forrest had to confirm, yes, this is the treasure. And, thousands of people were disappointed. I mean, there's internet lore too about like people who have died in pursuit of finding the treasure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the most amazing sort of, contemporary treasure hunt story ever. So I'd encourage listeners to go down that rabbit hole. If that treasure hadn't been found, just even thinking about it and the addiction to trying to solve it was real. Like, I spent months deciphering clues and digging in deeper and scouring Google Maps, dude. Like, I was just zooming in and highlighting and enhancing and trying to find all these little nuanced ridges and topography, just trying to figure out
clues to the puzzle, and some guy fucking found it.
God damn it. Well, it was an amazing idea. I think just another sort of like brilliant Ginger Runner, production, but ultimately didn't come to be. But you'll have to come up with new ideas that are.
There might be an alternative.
Yeah.
There might be some other ideas stewing in there, but yeah, it was one of those like gold, literally, and didn't come.
Well, what we did get to make this past summer was a fun little creative project about the Wonderland Trail around Mount Rainier. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you had made the film about Gary's FKT, a number of years ago. And I sort of feel like that was sort of like one of your first sort of films about other people. Is that right? Where it became less about, where instead of only focusing on gear reviews or your own training and racing, that you had an artistic approach to somebody else's goals. Let's talk about the Wonderland this past summer. I mean, those 7 days were quite eventful, and and it's close to home for both of us, and we both now have some experience on the trail, and it was a historic week out there around Mount Rainier. What are your reflections about that and about the creative process of putting the film together?
I mean, first, I'm in awe. I'm in awe of what you did. I'm in awe of what Caitlin did. I'm in awe of what Tyler did. During a year where everything is taken away, you're still trying. Like, you're still trying to do something and accomplish something. And to just even attempt to do an FKT around a mountain like that, to do such a big effort in a time when there's so much, just when everything is unsure, my hat's off to you. And what you managed to do out there is, dude, you set a standard. And I know Caitlin mentions that in the sort of at the beginning of the director's cut. She just kind of mentions like, set a new standard, Dylan. And you did that. Because reflecting back on 2015, when Gary set the FKT, that was one of those moments. It was very organic in the sense that Gary kind of calls us up and was like, hey man, do you want to drive up from California and crew me during the Wonderland? And we're like, fuck yeah, this sounds amazing. And I was like, can I bring a camera? And he's like, sure. And so we kind of accidentally documented history. And it was one of those moments where we didn't know what we had just witnessed until you begin to kind of soak it all in. And Gary beating Kyle Skaggs' time and seeing that it was thought to be unbeatable, and Gary beat it by 2 hours. And how the fuck did that happen? Yeah. So Gary had the day of his life. This will never be beaten. You have those thoughts because FKTs are so, when you see an FKT made, it's like, this is incredible.
Yeah. And
you start thinking like, this can't be beat. And so coming back in 2020, it was just, we've got Dylan Bowman. He's at the top of his game right now. We've got Caitlin Gerben, who is just taken to the trail scene by storm. She's the new name to follow, like just incredible. So we got these two incredible athletes on terrain that is familiar to them. They're now both Northwest. Dude, we love that you're in the Northwest. Don't fucking leave. You are such an icon here. We love it. Portland, and seeing them shred is, I mean, it was an honor, dude. It was an honor to be back on such hallowed ground, but it was also an honor to just witness such a standard being set. I wish I was there for Tyler's. I'm sure you were, probably wish you were there to see it too, because I know you guys are buddies. It's just crazy that it all happened in 7 fucking days. Like crazy. That. It's bonkers.
Yeah. In hindsight, it would have made so much sense for you to just stay and document Tyler's. Like, that would have been such an insane
just
thing
camping out
to document. I mean, because you did get just a very short piece of footage from Tyler's finish, basically, which is in the director's cut of the Wonderland film. But man, if it had all 3 of those in a row in 7 days time, man, that was something to be
I think that'd be the story. When you piece together a movie like this, and that's sort of the fun part and the challenging part is the puzzle, because you don't have a finished picture. You have all the pieces and you don't know how the pieces are going to fit together. Mm-hmm. And when I first shot both you and Caitlin's attempts, when I shot yours, I was like, this is amazing. Yeah. Who knows what fucking Caitlin's going to do next week? And then you have Tyler do what he did in the middle. And it kind of made me as a storyteller go, I do wish I had seen Tyler do it, because that's the lineage. You see Dylan crush it. You see Tyler crush it. And then you see Caitlin crush it. And that's sort of a cool linear story, while also having a bit of like, there's triumph and failure and all of that kind of encompassed. So trying to tell that cohesive story was the biggest challenge, because we had to do service to your attempt, because it was such groundbreaking, stellar set in the new bar. I wish we had more. Yeah, I wish I was there for Tyler, so I could kind of show like what Tyler did. Also, like Dylan set the ghost and Tyler had to chase the ghost. Yeah. And Tyler did. And Tyler had a really good day and shaved just a little bit off. So there is so much story there. And I wish, of course, I had documented some of Tyler's, but at the same point, his experience is his to tell, and his crews and stuff like that. And FKTs are so personal. I can only imagine. I've only set about 11. So I only know how personal they are.
Well, I think you did a great job of at least taking the footage that you could get from Tyler and making that part of the story, and doing justice to the fact that, that there was that dynamic of it being broken so quickly, and, me coming back and helping Caitlin, and all of this happening in less than 7 days. It's like,
less than a week, dude.
Looking back, it was just like such a whirlwind, such an emotional roller coaster. Cause I was like on a high, and then I was like super down, and then went back and faced Caitlin, and I was like back on cloud 9 again. And I don't know. I think just you did a great job of capturing it, but I think it's illustrative of, just the community and the sport, and how cool it is that, you have the ups and downs, you have the triumphs and failures, and you have these amazing characters. And, kudos to you for piecing it all together and doing the story justice.
Also kudos to you, man, just for being open and even talking about it and sharing it. Because I know, having documented Gary's attempts at Barkley and how much that it was difficult, it was difficult for him not being able to complete it the second time, obviously, but having to relive it every time that we went on tour with that movie. And every time we'd watch it with a live audience, Gary has to sit there and relive those moments in his life. And that's hard. Yeah. So I can only imagine for you, it's also like having to relive it anytime someone probably mentions like, dude, love Summer of Wonder, or congrats. It probably kind of hits you with that kind of bittersweet. Is it a little bittersweet from time to time?
Well, yeah. I think ultimately it ended up being a positive for me, even though for a few days it was like I was pretty down about it. I think ultimately, being able to have Tyler on my podcast and share the story of both of us and sort of, I don't know, like one of the things that I'm really interested in doing now in my career is like sort of shepherding the spirit of the sport forward, and like sort of handing it off to the next generation in the same way it was handed to me. And I think it's important to like, have the exhibition of good sportsmanship and friendship. And like, I think, I got a ton of really nice, feedback from people saying you handled that well, et cetera. And, not to pat myself on the back or whatever, but like Tyler's a great guy, and I had received messages of like, this jerk just waited for you to go and like went after your record immediately after you did it. And of course I had to go out of my way to say, no, I knew he was going. This is all fair. He didn't plan it that way. And so being able to sort of like help Tyler share his story, have the back and forth, and at the same time show that like we respect one another and that the sport is fucking so cool in that way that we can just sit down and drink beer together and talk about it instead of like me being super pissed off at him or whatever, or him like doing the end zone dance in front of me or whatever, So
sorry, anyway. Bro. So I do have to, I just want to quickly mention that I want to shout out to some of the individuals that really helped make that happen, because, the biggest challenge when presented with Dylan and Caitlin kind of saying, hey, do you want to make a movie about this? My first thought is, I can't fucking keep up with you two. I mean, there's no chance in hell. I'm literally just a normal average dude. If I tried, I'd die. So, shout outs to Ryan Thrower, to Yassine Daboon, to all of Caitlin's pacers, Ellie, Tara, Alex, you, Dylan. There's just a Brian Bark. Like, there's just such a team of people who made that movie possible because they had the speed in their legs to keep up with you fucking monsters, that there would be no movie without them. So, I mean, of course, a huge shout out to them.
Team effort. It's awesome, man. Well, yeah, thanks for putting it together, and thanks for everything you do. You're such an important part of our community, and you provide so much value, and not only for the core sort of Ginger Runner army, as I call them, but the for all of us who are sort of peripherally associated with the Ginger Runner community, and just generally enjoy the content that you make available, the information, the inspiration that you provide to each and every one of us with your content. So let's sign off by just talking a bit about what you've got coming up. I don't know if you're able to disclose any creative projects that you're working on, but I'm also, since we didn't talk about running hardly at all, I'd love to hear if you have any sort of athletic goals that you're looking at.
I'm going to go after the Wonderland FKT. I can't wait.
Dude, I'll give you the beta.
I've actually been dealing with this crazy calf injury for the last 2 months. It's just not going away. So I'm taking it super easy. I'm doing a ton of cycling, and it feels good because, I'm kind of considering this the down season, I guess. I don't normally take a down season, but I know that you have. Pro athletes do all the time. It's just part of it. So I'm kind of looking at it maybe as an opportunity.
Yeah.
Really, man, I have this idea for a project that's more of a personal one, but celebrating 10 years of Ginger Runner, I kind of wanted to do something challenging, both mentally and physically. And I had this idea for a thing called a double-double. One is kind of an homage to the old In-N-Out double-double. And another because it involves two sports. One section involves biking. So biking 2 50Ks and running 2 50Ks. So all back to back. So you basically ride for 50K, run for 50K, turn around, bike back 50K, and run back 50K.
Oh my gosh.
So it'd be 200 kilometers. I don't know when I do this, but the route is kind of been picked. I'm kind of stoked on the route because it involves some gravel biking. So there'd be some road sections, some gravel biking, some trail running.
Yeah.
I think it'd be super sick. Because I've been doing so much cycling lately that I'm like, why not? Why not use some bike?
Well, cool, man. Well, 10 years. Congratulations for that milestone. That's incredible. And thanks for coming on my show. And thanks for, we all look to you as a sort of an example of somebody who's doing the content thing well. And as I think about what we're trying to build here, you've been super gracious, even before we started recording this, about, equipment and things that I could invest in to sort of make my setup a little bit better. So I appreciate you being open with
anything, man,
with your experience and your expertise on that stuff. But
I am here for you anytime you need it, bro. You know it.
Thanks, bro. Well, this has been an absolute ball. I appreciate all your time, and look forward to sharing this one.
Thanks, Dylan, so much. And shout out to you and all you're doing with Pyllars, man. You're leading us into the next generation, and I really appreciate that. You rock. And give my love to Harmony too.
Will do.